Vincent Rodriguez stood in the doorway of their modest colonial, watching Clara adjust her new Armani blazer in the hallway mirror. The morning light caught the subtle sheen of the fabric, another recent acquisition from her expanding wardrobe. His calloused fingers unconsciously traced the doorframe's grain, wood he'd sanded and stained himself during their first year in this house. "Big presentation today?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Clara had been preparing for weeks, practicing her slides late into the night. "The quarterly review with the executive team," she replied, without turning from the mirror. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle, her manicured fingers lingering on the lapel. "David says if this goes well, there might be talk of expanding my territory." David. Always David these days. Vincent remembered when she used to say Mr. Kellerman with the nervous reverence of a new employee. That was before the promotion 3 months ago, before the monthly business trips, before the late-night strategy calls that pulled her from their bed. "That's great, babe," he offered. The endearment felt hollow on his tongue, a habit more than genuine affection. When had that started? Clara turned from the mirror, and for a moment, Vincent saw the woman he'd married 18 years ago, the determined night school student with dreams bigger than her receptionist's salary could afford. They'd met in that dingy community college classroom, both exhausted from full days of work, both hungry for something more. He was already apprenticing with Kowalski Construction. She was answering phones at a dental office and stealing moments to study between appointments. "What about you?" she asked, her question pulling him back. "Isn't today when they announced the infrastructure project lead?" "Yeah," he responded, shifting his weight, steel-toed boots solid against the hardwood he'd installed himself. "Jerry thinks I've got a good shot at foreman. That's wonderful," she said, but her eyes had already drifted to her phone, thumb scrolling through emails. The casual dismissal stung more than outright rejection would have. Vincent thought about the early years, when every small victory was celebrated together. Clara's first promotion to office manager, his journeyman certification, the day they signed the mortgage on this house. They'd made love on an air mattress in the empty master bedroom, promising each other that they'd fill every room with memories. The memories came, just not the ones they'd imagined. The first miscarriage at 8 weeks, the second at 12, the fertility treatments that drained their savings and their hope in equal measure. The silent agreement, never formally discussed, to stop trying. They'd channeled that energy elsewhere, Clara into her MBA, Vincent into mastering every trade skill he could learn. "I should go," Clara announced, grabbing her Louis Vuitton bag, another recent addition. When had her practical target totes become insufficient? "Clara," he called out, something in his voice making her pause at the door. "We need to talk about the spending. The credit card statement." "Not now, Vincent," she cut him off, her tone shifting to the crisp authority she used with subordinates. "I told you, these are investments in my career. Our future. Would you prefer I show up to executive meetings looking like I shop at Walmart?" The words hung between them like a challenge. Vincent, who bought his clothes at Dickies and considered a new Carhartt jacket a splurge, felt the familiar sting of inadequacy. "I just meant we should discuss major purchases. We used to do a lot of things," she interrupted, her voice softening slightly, but her hand remained on the doorknob. "I'll be late tonight. David scheduled a dinner meeting with the Peterson Group." Another dinner meeting. Vincent did the mental math. That made 3 this month, not counting the official travel. He wanted to ask why these meetings couldn't happen during business hours. Wanted to point out that he'd never had a dinner meeting in 20 years of construction work. But the words died in his throat. "I'll leave something in the fridge," he said instead. Clara's heels clicked across the porch he'd rebuilt last summer, each step taking her further into a world where a foreman's salary was pocket change, where David Kellerman's Harvard MBA opened doors that Vincent's calloused hands could only build. Alone in the house, Vincent walked through rooms that bore his fingerprints on every surface. The kitchen cabinets he'd custom-built to Clara's specifications. The bathroom he'd retiled during a brutal heat wave, sweating through the precise work while Clara brought him glasses of lemonade and praised his attention to detail. The home office where she now conducted late-night video calls behind closed doors. He paused at her desk, laptop closed but not shut down, the soft hum of the fan indicating she'd rushed out again. The screensaver would kick in soon, but for now, the last window she'd viewed remained visible. An email thread he didn't mean to read but couldn't look away from once he saw David's name. Can't wait for Seattle next week. The suite at the Four Seasons has an incredible view. We'll have plenty of time to review the Gray proposal and celebrate properly. Clara's response sat below it. Looking forward to it. V doesn't suspect anything about the extended trip. Monsieur Vincent. Reduced to an initial, an obstacle to manage. His phone buzzed. Jerry confirming he'd gotten the foreman position. $85,000 a year, the most money Vincent had ever made. He'd planned to surprise Clara tonight, maybe suggest she could finally slow down, pursue that pottery studio she used to dream about. The words from their last argument echoed. If you can't handle having an ambitious wife, maybe you should find someone who'll be content baking cookies. In his workshop behind the garage, Vincent ran his hands over the bookshelf he'd been crafting for their anniversary next month. Solid oak, dovetail joints, each shelf custom-measured for Clara's business books. He'd imagined her face when he revealed it, the way she used to look at his handiwork with genuine admiration. Now, staring at the half-finished piece, Vincent wondered when admiration had turned to tolerance. When his craftsmanship became quaint rather than valuable, when David Kellerman's soft hands that had never held a hammer became more appealing than his own scarred fingers that had built their entire life. The wood was solid, properly dried and carefully selected. But even the best lumber could warp under the wrong conditions. Vincent picked up his sandpaper, working the grain with methodical strokes, trying not to think about how some damage went deeper than the surface. I told myself it was just work stress. I had no idea how wrong I was about everything. Vincent's construction background had taught him to read the warning signs, the subtle shift in a foundation, the almost imperceptible crack that preceded catastrophic failure. Over the next month following his promotion to foreman, he found himself applying the same diagnostic eye to his marriage, cataloging anomalies like he used to review blueprints. The first real flag came wrapped in Italian silk. Clara returned from her Seattle trip with a Hermes scarf that probably cost more than their monthly grocery budget. "Conference gift," she explained, draping it around her shoulders with practiced elegance. They really went all out for the keynote speakers. Vincent knew construction conferences. The swag was usually branded polo shirts and USB drives, maybe a decent jacket if you were lucky. But he nodded, filing the information away like a measurement that didn't quite match the plans. "How was Seattle?" he ventured, settling into his recliner while she unpacked. "Maybe we could go together sometime." "See the Space Needle?" Clara's hands stilled for just a moment. "Oh, it was nothing special," she replied quickly. "Conference rooms all look the same. Airport, hotel, meetings, airport. You wouldn't have enjoyed it." Strange, considering David's email had mentioned a suite with an incredible view. The gifts continued. "Artisanal chocolates from San Francisco, client appreciation gift," she'd said. A Mont Blanc pen from Chicago, speaker recognition, she'd claimed. Each explanation delivered with the smooth confidence of someone who'd rehearsed their lines, but Vincent noticed she never quite met his eyes during these presentations. Saturday mornings used to be sacred. Coffee on the porch, planning the weekend's projects, bodies finding each other naturally as the sun climbed higher. But Clara had started scheduling emergency calls that pulled her into her office, door firmly closed, voice dropping to intimate whispers Vincent could hear but not decipher. This particular Saturday, she'd left her phone on the nightstand when she went to shower. The buzz of an incoming text drew Vincent's attention, not snooping, just the natural reflex of checking if something was urgent. The preview notification glowed. "Can't wait to see you again. Next week can't come soon enough." DK Vincent stared at the screen until it went dark. DK David Kellerman. The water shut off in the bathroom. He heard Clara's feet on the tile, the rustle of her towel. "You got a text," he mentioned when she emerged, keeping his voice neutral. "From DK, something about next week." The flush started at her chest, spreading up her neck to her cheeks. "Oh, that," she said, snatching the phone. "Quarterly projections are due. He's anxious about the Gray account." She typed quickly, deleting, responding. Vincent couldn't tell, but he recognized the defensive hunch of her shoulders. The same posture she'd had when he'd caught her hiding credit card bills in her underwear drawer years ago, back when their financial secrets were about overspending at Target, not $1,000 scarves. Their physical relationship had become another data point in Vincent's growing spreadsheet of concerns. Clara, who used to initiate as often as he did, now treated intimacy like a quarterly obligation. She'd lie still, participating but not present, her mind clearly elsewhere. The moment he finished, she'd head for the shower, scrubbing away his touch with expensive body wash that smelled nothing like the vanilla lotion she'd worn for 17 years. "You okay?" he'd asked last Tuesday, watching her rigid back as she faced away from him in bed, a decorative pillow creating a DMZ down the middle of their California king. "Fine. Just tired," she'd answered. "The Peterson presentation is consuming everything right now. Always a presentation, always a deadline, always David needing something that apparently only Clara could provide." The neighborhood barbecue should have been neutral ground. Vincent flipped burgers while Clara mingled, her new designer sundress drawing compliments from the other wives. He watched her laugh at Tom Gray's jokes, noticed how she touched Linda Patterson's arm while admiring her bracelet, the social choreography she'd learned in her corporate world, gestures that seemed both natural and performed. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her entire demeanor shifted. The practiced smile became genuine, her body language relaxing as she stepped away from the crowd, seeking privacy behind their garden shed. Vincent abandoned his post at the grill, circling around the other side of the yard to get closer. Through the slats in the fence, he could see her profile, one hand pressed to her ear, the other gesturing as if the caller could see her. "I miss you too," she said, her voice carrying that throaty quality she used to reserve for their private moments. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." A pause, then a soft laugh. "Yes, I'm being careful. The Peterson thing is the perfect cover." Vincent's chest tightened. He backed away, returning to the grill where Tom was poking at the burgers with concerned authority. "Everything okay, Mark? You look like you've seen a ghost," Tom observed. "Just the smoke," Vincent managed, blinking hard. Wind shifted. When Clara returned, sliding her phone into her pocket with practiced casualness, she kissed his cheek. "A performance for the neighbors. That was Lily," she announced, naming her sister in California. "Mom's having another one of her episodes." Vincent knew Clara's mother had been dead for 3 years. The lie was so bold, so unnecessary that it took his breath away. She could have said it was work, could have maintained the fiction that kept them both comfortable. Instead, she'd chosen a lie that assumed his stupidity, that counted on him not remembering the woman whose funeral they'd attended together, whose eulogy Clara had delivered with tears streaming down her face. The credit card statement arrived the following Thursday, tucked inside a Gray & Associates folder Clara had left on the kitchen counter. Vincent wasn't looking for it. He'd been searching for the warranty paperwork for their dishwasher, but the Visa logo caught his eye. The charges read like a map of deception. The Meridian restaurant appeared twice, both on nights when Clara had claimed to be working late at the office, eating takeout at her desk. The receipts showed dinners for 2, appetizers through dessert, bottles of wine that cost more than Vincent spent on groceries in a week. The timestamps matched perfectly with her emergency overtime texts. There were other charges, too, a day spa in the middle of a Wednesday when she was supposedly in back-to-back meetings, a jewelry store purchase that didn't correspond to any gift he'd received, hotel room charges in the city when she was allegedly at a conference in Boston. Vincent photographed each page with his phone, his hands steady despite the tremor in his chest. He returned the statement to exactly the position he'd found it, angled just so, Clara's coffee ring staining the upper corner. That night, Clara worked late again. Vincent sat in his workshop, staring at the photos on his phone, each charge another crack in the foundation of their marriage. He thought about confronting her, imagined the scene, accusations, denials, tears, promises. But Vincent had learned from construction that you didn't start demolition until you understood the full extent of the damage. He needed help, professional help, the kind that came with documentation and proof that would hold up when the structure finally came down. "I knew I was looking at the evidence of my wife's betrayal," What I didn't know was how much worse it was going to get. Vincent approached betrayal like a construction project. Assess the damage, identify the tools needed, create a plan, execute with precision. He spent his lunch breaks researching private investigators on his phone, sitting in his truck outside job sites, careful to clear his browser history afterward. The construction industry had taught him the value of references. You didn't hire a subcontractor based on their Yellow Pages ad. You asked around, checked their previous work, made sure they could deliver what they promised. Private investigators, he discovered, operated on the same principles. Elias Santos came recommended by 3 different online forums for men dealing with infidelity. His office occupied the 2nd floor above Ming's dry cleaning on the east side, a location that suggested discretion rather than flash. Vincent climbed the narrow stairs on a Tuesday afternoon, telling Jerry he had a dentist appointment. Santos looked like a man who'd spent decades observing without being observed. Medium height, medium build, forgettable features that would blend into any crowd. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Construction?" Santos asked, noting Vincent's Carhartt jacket and work boots. 20 years, Vincent confirmed. "Good. You understand documentation. Building a case is like building a house. Everything needs to be square and level, or it falls apart in court," Santos replied with professional understanding. Vincent laid out his evidence, the credit card statements, the text preview, the overheard phone call. Santos took notes on a legal pad, occasionally asking for clarification. "The business trips with the boss. That's your smoking gun," Santos observed, setting down his pen. "Hotels keep records, security cameras catch everything. The local stuff is harder to prove, but not impossible." He leaned back in his chair. "Full investigation runs $3,000. Half up front, half when I deliver the report. Usually takes 3 to 4 weeks, $3,000. Vincent had it, thanks to his foreman promotion and years of careful saving. Clara managed their main accounts, but Vincent had always kept a separate fund for tools and equipment. Money she considered his to waste on boy toys. "What exactly do I get for that?" Vincent asked. "Comprehensive surveillance during the next business trip, photographic evidence if available, documentation of local meetings, financial forensics if you can provide access to records, and a report that will hold up in court," Santos explained. "I'm a licensed investigator. My testimony is admissible, and I've never had my evidence thrown out." Vincent wrote the check from his equipment account. Santos gave him a receipt and a burner phone. "Only call me on this," Santos instructed. "Your regular phone might be compromised. These cheaters get paranoid, sometimes install tracking apps. I'll text you updates as I get them." While Santos worked, Vincent began his own preparations. He opened a new checking account at a credit union across town, slowly transferring money in small increments, 200 here, 300 there, amounts that looked like cash withdrawals for job materials or tools. Clara never questioned construction expenses. He researched divorce law during breaks at work, sitting in his truck with his phone, learning terms like equitable distribution and marital assets. Their state still recognized adultery as grounds for divorce, which could affect alimony and asset division. The betrayed spouse had advantages, but only with proof. Rebecca Reyes came recommended by his foreman, Jerry, who'd gone through an ugly divorce 5 years prior. "She's a barracuda," Jerry had said with admiration. "Took my ex apart piece by piece when we caught her with the pool boy." Vincent met Reyes at her office after work, still in his construction clothes. She didn't seem to mind the sawdust on his boots or the concrete dust on his jeans. "Tell me everything," she said, and Vincent did. Reyes took notes, occasionally asking pointed questions. When he mentioned the private investigator, she nodded approvingly. "Santos is good. His reports are bulletproof," she confirmed. "Once we have that, we can file immediately." The element of surprise is crucial, prevents them from hiding assets or crafting counter-narratives. "What about the house?" Vincent asked. "You renovated it yourself? Have receipts? Before marriage or after?" she inquired. "After, but I did all the work. Have photos of everything, permits, receipts," he answered. "Good. That strengthens your claim. The adultery helps too. Judges here don't look kindly on spouses who betray the marriage contract, especially when marital assets funded the affair, she explained with satisfaction. The next 3 weeks passed in a surreal fog. Clara continued her routine: late meetings, weekend emails, monthly trip to Boston with David. She'd grown bolder, or maybe just careless. The effort to hide the affair seemed to be exhausting her. She barely maintained conversation at dinner, lost in her phone, occasionally smiling at messages she didn't share. Vincent played his part, the oblivious husband, focused on work, grateful for the overtime his position allowed. He mentioned the new municipal project starting next month, how it would mean longer hours but better pay. Clara barely looked up from her laptop. "That's nice, honey," she murmured absently. The endearment was automatic, meaningless. Vincent wondered when they'd become strangers sharing a house, when their conversations had reduced to logistics and lies. The burner phone buzzed while Vincent was installing crown molding in a client's dining room. Santos had sent a simple message. "Package ready. Can meet tonight." They met at a diner off the interstate, the kind of place where no one looked twice at two men having coffee at 9 p.m. Santos slid a manila envelope across the table, thick with documentation. "It's worse than you thought," Santos said quietly. Vincent opened the envelope, his hands steady despite the churning in his gut. The first photo showed Clara entering the Marriott in Boston with David, his hand on the small of her back. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. when she was supposedly in an all-day vendor meeting. The next photos progressed like a flipbook of betrayal. Clara and David at dinner, her head thrown back in laughter, David's hand covering hers across a table. The two of them in a hotel bar, Clara sitting so close she was practically in his lap. Entering his apartment building on 3 different occasions when she'd claimed to be at the office. "There's more," Santos indicated, pointing to the printed pages behind the photos. Hotel receipts showed room service charges for champagne and strawberries. A receipt from Tiffany's for a tennis bracelet. Vincent recognized it as the one Clara claimed her company had given her for landing the Peterson account. David's credit card statements, obtained through means Santos didn't elaborate on, showed charges that mirrored Clara's mysterious purchases. The most damaging evidence came from David's own carelessness. His Instagram account, set to public, featured photos from business trips that inadvertently captured Clara's reflection in windows, her distinctive handbag on restaurant tables, her shoes visible under a hotel table. In one photo from a Miami conference, David had posted a sunrise beach photo with the caption, "Perfect morning." Clara's footprints were clearly visible in the sand beside his. "There's something else," Santos added, pulling out a final document. "David Kellerman is married." Vincent felt the air leave his lungs. The document was a wedding announcement from 8 years ago. David Kellerman and Patricia Gray, daughter of Judge Harold Gray. 2 kids, a house in Westchester. The perfect corporate family. "Does his wife know?" Vincent asked. "Unknown. But she's got more to lose than you do," Santos replied. "Judge Gray is old school, family values, moral standings. This would destroy David's standing in those circles." Vincent stared at the evidence spread across the sticky diner table. Months of lies documented in painful detail. The sheer scope of the deception was breathtaking. It wasn't just the intimacy. It was the elaborate construction of an entirely false life, complete with cover stories, fake receipts, and calculated misdirection. "What do you want to do with this?" Santos asked. Vincent gathered the documents carefully, returning them to the envelope. "What I do best," he said firmly. "Build something that will last." The next morning, Vincent delivered the entire package to Rebecca Reyes. She reviewed each piece with professional satisfaction. "This is a slam dunk, Mr. Rodriguez," she declared. "With this evidence, we can protect your assets, potentially claim damages for emotional distress, and ensure she doesn't see a penny of alimony. When do you want to file?" Vincent thought about the bookshelf in his workshop, still unfinished. About 18 years of marriage reduced to surveillance photos and credit card receipts. About David Kellerman's soft hands on his wife's body. "Prepare everything," he instructed. "But I'll tell you when to file." "I want to choose my moment," Reyes smiled, recognizing the calm fury in his voice. "The best revenge is served with proper documentation," she agreed. We'll be ready when you are. I had everything I needed to destroy her. I just had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Rain hammered against the windows as Vincent sat in his living room, blueprints for the municipal project spread across the coffee table. He'd been reviewing foundation specifications when he heard Clara's key in the lock. 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday, earlier than usual for her late meetings. The door opened and Clara entered, shaking rain from her umbrella. But she wasn't alone. David Kellerman followed, closing the door behind him with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. Vincent's hands stilled on the blueprints. He looked up slowly, taking in David's appearance, the tailored suit that probably cost more than Vincent made in a month, the Italian leather shoes leaving wet prints on the hardwood Vincent had installed, the entitled smirk of a man who'd never faced a real fight in his life. "Vincent," Clara said, her voice steady, businesslike. "We need to talk." She didn't even have the decency to look nervous. Instead, she stood beside David with the same poised confidence she used in board meetings. Rain droplets still glistening on her Burberry trench coat. "I want a divorce," she announced, as if declaring the quarterly earnings were down. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying them both. David's hand rested possessively on Clara's lower back, not even trying to hide it anymore. "The arrogance was breathtaking, I see," Vincent said quietly. "And you brought him here to, what, supervise?" David stepped forward, surveying the living room with obvious disdain, the worn leather furniture, the modestly sized TV, the photos of Clara and Vincent from better times still hanging on the walls. "Frankly, Vincent," David said, his voice carrying the prep school condescension that men like him never quite outgrew, "Clara deserves better than a man who smells like sawdust and sweat. She's executive material and you're—" He gestured vaguely. "This." The insult hung in the air like a challenge. Vincent felt 18 years of careful control, of measured responses, of turning the other cheek, crystallize into something harder than concrete. But not yet. Not quite yet. Clara produced a manila folder from her bag, pre-drafted divorce papers, no doubt prepared by David's attorney. She set them on the coffee table with crisp efficiency, covering Vincent's blueprints. "I've been more than fair," she declared, flipping to tagged pages. "You'll keep your truck and your tools. I'll take the house. My salary has been paying most of the mortgage anyway. And given the disparity in our incomes, you'll pay alimony. Standard support for a marriage of this length?" "Standard," Vincent repeated, tasting the word. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," Clara continued. "You have no leverage here. No prenup, no grounds for contesting. Sign the papers, and we can all move on with our lives." Vincent laughed then, a low, rumbling sound that started in his chest and rolled out like thunder. Both Clara and David took an involuntary step back. "No leverage," Vincent said, standing slowly. His construction boots made him 3 inches taller than David, broader by half. "That's interesting." He walked to his desk, a solid oak piece he'd built himself, and retrieved 2 manila envelopes from the drawer. The first he tossed onto the coffee table next to Clara's papers. "Funny thing about leverage," he said conversationally. "Sometimes it's just about who files first." Clara snatched the envelope, her confidence wavering as she pulled out Rebecca Reyes's divorce petition, filed that morning at 8 a.m. with the county clerk. "What is this?" Her voice pitched higher, the executive composure cracking. "That's what a real divorce filing looks like," Vincent explained. "Adultery as grounds. Full documentation provided to the court." He hefted the second envelope. "Which brings us to this." Clara's face drained of color as she recognized the investigator's report. Her hands shook as she flipped through the photographs, the hotel entrances, the intimate dinners, David's hand on her body in places Vincent used to touch. "You had me followed?" she gasped, the outrage in her voice almost comical. "I had the truth documented," Vincent corrected. "Every hotel, every dinner, every lie. Did you really think I was that stupid? That I wouldn't notice the charges, the gifts, the sudden business trips?" David tried to edge toward the door, but Vincent shifted, blocking his path with the casual authority of a man who'd spent 20 years moving heavy objects. "Going somewhere, David?" Vincent asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "We're not done here." "This is between you and Clara," David started. "No," Vincent interrupted, stepping closer, close enough that David could probably smell the honest sweat he'd mocked moments ago. You came into my house. You f***ed my wife. You insulted my work, my life, everything I've built with these hands. He held up his calloused palms, scarred from decades of labor. So this is very much between us. The punch came from nowhere, or seemed to, if you didn't know how to read Vincent's body language, the subtle shift in weight that preceded violence. 20 years of swinging hammers had given him perfect economy of motion. The right cross connected with David's jaw with a sound like a 2x4 snapping. David went down hard, his expensive suit offering no protection against physics. He tried to get up, and Vincent helped him along with a hook to the soft belly that too many business dinners had created. David collapsed again, retching on the hardwood floor, his dignity pooling around him like rainwater. "Vincent, stop!" Clara screamed, dropping to her knees beside David. "I'll call the police." "Go ahead," Vincent responded, pulling out his phone to show her the recording app that had been running since they'd walked in. "I've got your boyfriend on tape insulting me in my own home, announcing your affair. I'm just defending myself against a home invader who came here to threaten me." Clara's face cycled through emotions. Rage, fear, desperation, and finally, the one Vincent had been waiting for. Defeat. "Please," she pleaded, her voice small now, nothing like the executive who'd walked in 10 minutes ago. "We can work this out. Counseling, therapy. I made a mistake." "No," Vincent said firmly, his voice as solid as foundation concrete. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice. Hundreds of choices every day for months." David groaned from the floor, trying to sit up. His nose was bleeding. Crimson drops staining his white shirt like evidence markers. "There's more," Vincent continued, almost conversationally. "I sent copies of everything to Gray and Associates this morning. HR, legal, and the entire board of directors. Seems using company funds for personal travel is a fireable offense. Who knew?" Clara's face went white. "You didn't," she whispered. "Check your email," he suggested. She fumbled for her phone, fingers shaking. Vincent watched her face crumble as she read the automated response from HR acknowledging receipt of his complaint. "Oh, and David?" Vincent turned to the man still struggling on his floor. "Your wife Patricia got a copy too. Sent it certified mail to your Westchester house. Should arrive tomorrow if it hasn't already." David's eyes widened in pure terror. "Patricia doesn't— You can't!" he sputtered. "I can and I did," Vincent stated. "Judge Gray's daughter, right? I bet she's got excellent lawyers. Probably already freezing your accounts." Vincent walked to the front door, opened it wide despite the rain. "Get out of my house, both of you," he commanded. Clara stood on shaking legs, mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "Vincent, please." 18 years, she began. "Meant nothing to you," he cut her off. "You destroyed them for what? Better restaurants? A corner office? A man with soft hands who couldn't build a birdhouse if his life depended on it?" She helped David to his feet, his weight draped over her designer-clad shoulders. At the doorway, she turned back once more. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked desperately. Vincent shrugged. "David probably has a nice apartment." "Oh, wait, his wife's lawyers are probably already changing those locks. Better call that sister of yours, you know, the one whose mother is having episodes 3 years after dying." The reference to her barbecue lie hit home. Clara flinched, realizing just how much Vincent had known, how long he'd been planning this moment. "Your things will be in the driveway tomorrow," he added. "Take them or they go to Goodwill." He closed the door on them, listening to their stumbling footsteps on the porch he'd built, the car doors slamming, the engine starting. Through the window, he watched David's BMW pull away, taillights disappearing into the rain. Vincent looked around his living room, their living room once upon a time. The coffee table still held 2 sets of divorce papers. He picked up Clara's version with its demands for alimony and the house and fed it into the fireplace, watching legal lies turn to ash. Tomorrow there would be lawyers and mediators and paperwork. But tonight, Vincent Rodriguez stood in the house he'd built, on the foundation he'd poured, surrounded by the work of his calloused hands. For the first time in months, it felt like home, I thought watching her face crumble would be the end of it. But the real justice was just getting started. 6 months later, Vincent stood on the skeleton frame of what would become a 3-story custom home, checking measurements against his plans. The September sun warmed his back as he worked, and from this height he could see across the entire development, 12 lots, all contracted to Rodriguez Construction. His phone buzzed. Rebecca Reyes's name appeared on the screen. "Divorce is finalized," she announced without preamble. "Signed by the judge this morning." Vincent set down his level, taking a moment to absorb the news. "Terms?" he asked. "Everything we asked for," she confirmed. "Clara gets her car and personal belongings. You keep the house, all retirement accounts, and she pays you $30,000 in damages for emotional distress." The adultery evidence was insurmountable. $30,000 seed money that had helped launch Rodriguez Construction from a sole proprietorship to a legitimate company with 3 employees and a waiting list of clients, stretching into next year. "What about her job?" he inquired. "Terminated for cause 6 months ago, as you know. No severance, no references," Reyes reminded him. "Last I heard, she's working at a small accounting firm in Riverside, making about $40,000 a year, less than half her Gray and Associates' salary." Vincent felt no satisfaction in that, just a hollow acknowledgement of consequences meeting actions. After ending the call, Vincent descended the ladder and found his crew gathering for lunch. Tom and Miguel, skilled framers he'd stolen from his old company with better pay and profit sharing. Sarah, a young carpenter's apprentice who reminded him of himself 20 years ago, hungry to learn, willing to work, hands already developing the calluses that marked their trade. "Boss, you see this?" Tom called out, holding up his phone, showing a news article from the business section. "David Kellerman, former Gray and Associates executive, files for bankruptcy," the headline read. Vincent skimmed the article. Patricia Kellerman had taken David for everything in their divorce: the Westchester house, the investment accounts, custody of their children. Her father, Judge Gray, had ensured David's reputation was thoroughly destroyed in their social circles. No firm would touch him. He'd been reduced to contract consulting work, living in a studio apartment in Newark. "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy," Miguel commented, biting into his sandwich. Vincent said nothing, pocketing his phone. David Kellerman was a ghost from another life, no more relevant to his present than the phantom pain from an old injury. The house felt different now. Vincent had kept it, not out of sentiment, but practicality. The mortgage was nearly paid off, and every improvement carried his sweat equity. He'd donated Clara's abandoned belongings to charity, repainted the master bedroom, replaced the California King with a queen that didn't dominate the space. The bookshelf he'd been building for their anniversary found its way to the women's shelter downtown, along with a check from his first Rodriguez Construction profit. The director had been grateful. Apparently, they needed furniture that could withstand heavy use, and Vincent's craftsmanship was built to last generations. His dating life remained purposefully simple. Coffee with Sarah from the hardware store had evolved into occasional dinners, but she understood his pace, respected his need to rebuild trust as carefully as he'd rebuild a damaged foundation. She had her own business, a small garden center, and appreciated both his work ethic and his reluctance to rush into anything permanent. "I like that you take your time," she'd said last week, watching him precisely measure wood for her store's new shelving. Careful work lasts longer. She was right, of course. Vincent had learned the hard way that anything built too quickly, without proper foundation work, would eventually collapse. The surprising satisfaction came from unexpected sources. Former clients of David's reached out, having heard about Vincent's company through the peculiar grapevine of suburban scandal. They hired him for renovations, praising his professionalism while sharing whispered updates about David's downfall. "He's living in Newark now," Mrs. Patterson had mentioned while Vincent installed her new kitchen cabinets. "Patricia got everything, even his country club membership. I heard he tried to get a job at Goldman, but Patricia's father made some calls." Vincent had simply nodded, focusing on ensuring the cabinet doors hung perfectly level. Other people's drama was just background noise now. Clara had tried reaching out 3 times. The first was a letter, forwarded through Rebecca Reyes, claiming she'd made a terrible mistake, that David had manipulated her, that 18 years meant something. Vincent had read it once, then filed it with the divorce papers, documentation to keep, but not to dwell on. The second was a voicemail left at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, her voice slurred with whine and regret. "Vincent, I messed up. I messed everything up. He promised me so much, and I believed him. I threw away everything real for corporate bull and a man who ran the moment things got hard. Please, just talk to me." Vincent had deleted it, but not before saving a copy for his lawyer, just in case. The third attempt was in person. She'd shown up at one of his job sites, looking diminished in a way that had nothing to do with her obvious weight loss or the drugstore dye job attempting to cover gray roots. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack professional wear that didn't quite fit right. "5 minutes," she'd pleaded. "You owe me that. I owe you nothing." Vincent had continued working, installing hurricane ties on roof joists. "You made your choices. I was an idiot. David promised me a different life, and you got it." Vincent climbed down from his ladder to face her directly. "Just not the one you expected." She'd left then, shoulders shaking with what might have been tears. Vincent had returned to his work. Some foundations, once cracked, could never be properly repaired. It was better to clear the ground and start fresh. The business thrived on Vincent's reputation for honest work and fair dealing. His clients appreciated that he showed up when promised, finished on schedule, and never padded invoices. Word spread the way it always did in construction, one satisfied customer telling another, "Suburban Network's carrying recommendations across dinner parties and school pickup lines. You're the one whose ex-wife ran off with that corporate guy who went bankrupt, right?" A new client had asked with the tactless curiosity of the wealthy. "That's ancient history," Vincent had replied, steering the conversation back to their kitchen renovation plans. But he knew the story added to his mystique, the betrayed husband who'd risen above, who'd built something solid from the wreckage. It was a narrative his clients could understand, a moral framework that made them trust him with their homes. Evenings were his own now. No more waiting for Clara to come home from late meetings, no more pretending not to notice perfume that wasn't hers or his. He worked in his shop when he wanted, watched baseball without apology, cooked simple meals that satisfied him without requiring Instagram documentation. The house was quiet, but not lonely. Vincent had learned the difference between solitude and abandonment. Solitude was chosen, comfortable, productive. Abandonment was what Clara had done, to their marriage, to their vows, to the life they'd built board by board and brick by brick. On this particular evening, 6 months after the confrontation that ended everything, Vincent sat on his front porch with a beer and his laptop, reviewing proposals for the Riverside development. Rodriguez Construction had been invited to bid on the entire project, 40 homes over 2 years. It would mean hiring more crew, buying better equipment, maybe even opening a proper office instead of running everything from his kitchen table. His phone buzzed. Sarah texting about dinner Saturday. Her place, she was attempting Italian. "Fair warning," she'd written. "My cooking isn't quite restaurant quality." "I prefer home cooking," Vincent replied, meaning it. The sun set over his neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Other families were settling into their evening routines, kids being called in from play, grills firing up for dinner, couples walking dogs along the sidewalk he'd helped pour 3 summers ago. Vincent thought about Clara occasionally, wondered if she was happy in her diminished life, if she'd found what she'd been looking for in conference rooms and corporate climbing. He thought about David, too. Imagined him in his Newark studio, eating takeout alone, wondering how he'd lost everything to a man who smelled like sawdust and sweat. But mostly, Vincent thought about tomorrow. The Riverside project to bid on, the oak lumber being delivered for a custom entertainment center, teaching Sarah's nephew basic carpentry next weekend, dinner with Sarah on Saturday. He'd built his life once on shifting ground, trusting someone else with the blueprints. That structure had collapsed, as structures built on bad foundations always did. But a skilled craftsman could always build again. Better this time on ground he'd tested himself, with materials he trusted, creating something that would last. The porch light clicked on automatically, responding to the deepening dusk. Vincent closed his laptop and headed inside to his quiet, honest house. Tomorrow would be another day of good work, clean money, and the satisfaction of creating something solid in a world full of facades. Some foundations, once cracked, could never be properly repaired. But a skilled craftsman could always build something better from the ground up, and Vincent Rodriguez was a very skilled craftsman indeed. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I never thought I'd be telling this story. 22 years of marriage, and here I am, Jack Turner, sitting in the house I built with my own hands, trying to make sense of how it all fell apart. But maybe I should start at the beginning, back when Melissa and I were just two kids trying to make it in this world. We met at Murphy's Diner on Route 47, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the pie's always yesterday's. She was working the night shift. Her business textbook spread across the back counter between orders. I'd come in after pulling a 14-hour day laying foundation for the new shopping center. My hands were cracked and bleeding despite the work gloves, and she noticed. "You need to take better care of those," she said, bringing me a bowl of warm water and soap without my asking. Hands like that, they tell a story. Might as well make it a good one. That was Melissa, always seeing the bigger picture, always thinking ahead. I fell for her right there, between the smell of bacon grease and the fluorescent buzz of those old lights. 6 months later, we were married at the courthouse, her in a simple white dress from Target, me in my father's old suit that didn't quite fit right. Those early years were something else. I worked construction during the day and picked up handyman jobs on weekends. Every dollar that didn't go to rent or food went to Melissa's education. She was going for her business degree, determined to climb out of the working-class neighborhood we'd grown up in. I admired that about her, that hunger for something more. When she graduated, I surprised her with the deed to a quarter-acre lot on Maple Street. It wasn't much, just a patch of earth with some old oak trees, but it was ours. I spent the next year building our house, working nights and weekends, learning as I went. Every stud I placed, every nail I drove, was a promise to her that we were building something permanent. The day we moved in, Melissa cried. She ran her hands along the custom cabinets I'd built, traced the grain of the hardwood floors I'd laid myself. "You did this for us," she kept saying. "You built this with your own hands. We made the decision not to have kids early on. It wasn't that we didn't want them exactly, but we wanted to build our life first." Melissa had her career ambitions, and I had dreams of starting my own construction crew. Kids would have complicated things, and we were already complicated enough, two people from nothing trying to become something. For 15 years, it worked. Melissa climbed the corporate ladder at Hammond Industries while I built my reputation as a craftsman. My crew grew from just me in a pickup truck to 6 guys in a fleet of vehicles. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. More importantly, we were proud of each other. The shift was so gradual, I almost missed it. It started when Melissa got promoted to regional manager 3 years ago. The company bought her a new wardrobe, designer suits that cost more than I made in a week. She started going to conferences, corporate retreats, networking events. At first, she'd come home bubbling with excitement, telling me about the deals she'd closed, the executives she'd impressed, but somewhere along the line, her stories changed. Instead of we, it became I. Instead of coming home excited, she'd come home exhausted, pouring herself wine before even taking off her heels. She started correcting my grammar at dinner, suggesting I read books on professional development. When the Johnsons next door complimented the deck I'd built them, Melissa would smile tightly and change the subject. "Maybe you should update your wardrobe," she suggested one night, going through my closet with a critical eye. "You never know when we might need to attend a company function." That should have been my first real warning sign. In 20 years, she'd never cared what I wore. But I wrote it off as stress from her position. Then came the invitation to Hammond Industries' annual gala. She mentioned it casually over breakfast, almost as an afterthought while scrolling through her phone. The company gala is next month. Spouses are welcome to attend. The way she said it, welcome to attend, like I was some optional accessory. Of course I'll be there, I replied, spreading jam on my toast. She looked up from her phone, something unreadable in her expression. You don't have to come if you're not comfortable. I know these events aren't really your thing. My wife's big company party? I'll be there, I assured her. She went shopping the next day and came back with a suit for me. $800, no discussion, no asking my size or preference. I should have recognized the warning signs when she bought me that suit without asking what I wanted. But I was still foolish enough to believe she wanted me there. The suit Melissa bought me cost $800. I know because I saw the receipt she'd tried to hide in her purse. $800 for something I'd wear once, maybe twice. The fabric felt foreign against my skin, too smooth, too perfect. My hands, calloused from years of honest work, kept catching on the delicate material. Stop fidgeting, Melissa said, adjusting my tie for the third time. She stepped back, examining me like I was one of her quarterly reports. And remember, when people ask what you do, say you run a construction firm. Not that you're a contractor. Same thing, isn't it? I asked. She gave me that look, the one that had been appearing more frequently. Part pity, part frustration. It's about presentation, Jack. These people, they respond to certain language. The Grand Meridian Hotel stood like a glass monument to excess in the heart of downtown. Valet parking, red carpet, the whole production. I watched Melissa transform the moment we stepped through those doors. Her posture straightened, her smile became something practiced and gleaming. Even her voice changed, dropping into a lower, more authoritative register. Melissa, you look absolutely stunning. A woman in a dress that probably cost more than my truck rushed over, air-kissing my wife's cheeks. Catherine, you remember my husband Jack, Melissa said. The pause before husband was barely noticeable, but I caught it. Catherine's eyes swept over me, her smile freezing slightly. Of course. You're in construction, right? He runs his own firm, Melissa interjected before I could answer. Blue-collar entrepreneurship. It's quite charming, really. Charming. Like I was some exotic pet she'd brought to show and tell. The ballroom was a sea of suits and evening gowns, champagne flutes catching the light from massive chandeliers. I recognized some faces from Melissa's stories, the accounts she managed, the departments she coordinated with. But seeing them here, in their element, I realized I'd never really understood her world. There's Richard, Melissa said, her entire demeanor shifting. I followed her gaze to a man holding court near the bar. Richard Hale, her boss. I'd heard his name 1,000 times over the past 2 years since he'd joined the company, but this was our first meeting. He was everything I wasn't. Tall, lean, with silver hair that looked professionally styled and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Richard, I'd like you to meet my husband Jack, she said. This time, she didn't pause before husband, but something in her tone made it sound like an apology. Richard's handshake was firm but brief, his attention already shifting back to Melissa. The famous Jack. Melissa's told us so much about you. Construction, right? Good, honest work. The backbone of America, he said with a tone that dripped condescension. That's right, I replied, keeping my voice level. I build things that last. How refreshing, he responded, already turning back to Melissa. Someone who works with their hands. Throughout the evening, I endured variations of the same theme. Must be nice not to deal with corporate politics, one executive mused. I bet you don't take your work home with you, another added with a knowing smile. But what killed me wasn't their dismissal. I'd dealt with that before. It was watching Melissa not only allow it but participate in it. She laughed at their jokes about real men and simple pleasures. When someone asked about our house, she mentioned I'd built it myself, but quickly added, "Of course, we're thinking of hiring a real architect for the renovation. We've never discussed any renovation," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, Jack," she laughed, touching my arm dismissively. "We've talked about updating the kitchen for years." We hadn't. Not once. I watched her with Richard, noting things I'd been too blind to see before. How she knew he preferred Macallan 18 to Glenlivet. How she laughed at his stories before the punchline, already knowing them by heart. How her hand lingered on his arm when making a point. How she positioned herself always within his line of sight, even when talking to others. "Your wife is quite the asset," a man named Isaac told me during dinner. "Richard says he doesn't know what he'd do without her." "I bet he doesn't," I replied, watching them across the room. Melissa was whispering something in Richard's ear, her hand on his shoulder. He threw his head back, laughing, his hand briefly touching her waist. "They make a good team," Isaac continued, oblivious to my tone. "Some partnerships just work, you know." Chemistry. The evening dragged on. Awards were given, speeches made, deals celebrated. I stood on the periphery, a ghost at my own wife's party, watching her navigate this world with an ease that made our life together seem like a rough draft she'd finally edited out. During the CEO's speech about corporate family and valued partnerships, I noticed Melissa and Richard had disappeared. I found them on the terrace, heads close together over his phone, her finger pointing at something on the screen. Innocent enough except for the way she was pressed against his side, the way his arm draped around her waist with casual ownership. "There you are," I said, stepping onto the terrace. They didn't jump apart. That would have been too obvious. Instead, Melissa slowly shifted away, her movement deliberate and controlled. "Jack, we were just reviewing the Alexander projection," she explained. "On a Saturday night?" "At a party?" I asked. "Big deals don't wait for business hours," Richard said smoothly. "Your wife understands that. She's got killer instincts." "Among other things, I'm sure," I replied. Richard's smile tightened. "I think I hear them calling for the raffle inside," he said, touching Melissa's elbow. "Shall we?" They walked past me, Melissa avoiding my eyes. I needed air, needed space to process what my wife had become. I never imagined what I'd see when I looked back through those windows would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The terrace air was cool against my flushed face. Below, the city sprawled in neat grids of light, organized and predictable, everything my life no longer was. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, trying to reconcile the woman inside with the girl who'd bandaged my hands all those years ago at Murphy's Diner. The music had shifted to something slower, romantic. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the dance floor filling with couples. That's when I spotted them, Melissa and Richard, moving toward the center of the floor like they owned it. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Of course she'd dance with her boss. It was corporate politics, keeping the higher-ups happy. I'd watched her play these games before, though never quite like this. Richard's hand rested on the small of her back, perfectly appropriate. Melissa's hand on his shoulder, nothing wrong there, but then I really watched them. The way their bodies moved in perfect synchronization, like they'd done this before, many times before. The way she looked up at him, her face showing an expression I hadn't seen in years. Genuine joy, unguarded attraction. The way he whispered something that made her throw her head back in laughter, exposing her throat. Richard's hand began to drift lower. Still watching from the terrace, I waited for Melissa to step back, to subtly redirect his hand to a more appropriate position. She was always so conscious of appearances, after all. Instead, she moved closer, her body molding against his. The song shifted to something with a Latin beat. Other couples struggled with the rhythm, laughing at their clumsy attempts. But Melissa and Richard moved like professionals, his hands guiding her through turns and dips with practiced ease. When had she learned to dance like that? In 22 years, she'd never once danced with me that way. That's when it happened. Richard spun her out, then pulled her back against him, her back to his chest. His hands slid down her sides, ostensibly guiding her hips to the rhythm. But then his right hand kept going, sliding over the curve of her ass and squeezing. Not a brush, not an accident. A deliberate, possessive grab. Time stopped. I waited for her outrage. For her to step away, slap him, make a scene. Instead, she pressed back against him, her own hand reaching back to pull him closer, in front of everyone, in front of 200 of their colleagues and their spouses, like I didn't exist. Like I wasn't standing right there watching my entire world implode. The cold clarity that descended on me was almost peaceful. 22 years of marriage reduced to this moment. Every sacrifice, every late night I'd worked to pay for her education, every dream I'd deferred so she could chase hers. All of it meaningless. I didn't remember moving through the crowd. One moment I was on the terrace, the next I was yanking Richard away from my wife. He stumbled backward, champagne spilling from someone's glass. A woman shrieking in surprise. "What the hell?" Richard started. But my fist connected with his jaw before he could finish. He went down hard, his expensive suit offering no protection against the marble floor. I should have stopped there. The rational part of my brain, the part that had built a successful business, that had navigated 22 years of marriage, told me to stop. But then Melissa screamed, "Jack, no! What are you doing?" Her concern was for him. Not for our marriage, not for what I'd witnessed, but for the man who'd just publicly groped her. I hauled Richard up by his collar and hit him again. His nose exploded in a fountain of blood, spattering his white dress shirt. Someone was screaming for security. Melissa was pulling at my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You're ruining everything," she shrieked. "You're destroying my career." Her career. Not our marriage. Her career. I let Richard drop to the floor where he curled into a fetal position, blood pooling beneath his face. The crowd had formed a circle around us, phones out, recording everything. Good. Let them document this moment. Let them all see what Melissa Turner had become. "We're done," I told her, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. 22 years, and we're done. "Jack, please, let's discuss this," she started, reaching for me. "Discuss what?" "How long you've been f***ing him. How many of these people knew before I did?" I gestured at the crowd. Several people looked away, unable to meet my eyes. That's what I thought. Security arrived, 4 men in black suits moving toward me. I raised my hands, showing I was done. Richard was moaning on the floor, someone calling for an ambulance. Melissa stood there in her designer dress, a tear in the fabric where she'd caught it trying to pull me away, her carefully styled hair in disarray, her lipstick smeared. "Sir, we need you to leave," the head of security said. "Already going," I replied, straightening my $800 suit jacket. I turned to Melissa one last time. "Find your own way home. Maybe Richard can give you a ride when he gets out of the hospital." The last thing I saw as the elevator doors closed was my wife kneeling beside her boss, using cocktail napkins to stop the bleeding, while 200 of Dallas's corporate elite watched and whispered. I left her there with her broken boss and her shattered reputation, but that was just the beginning of what she was about to lose. The locksmith arrived at 11 p.m., an hour after I got home. Tony Garza, one of my subcontractors, didn't ask questions when I called. That's the thing about blue-collar relationships. We show up for each other, no explanations needed. "All of them?" he asked, looking at the doors. "Every lock. Front, back, garage. And install the security bolts I've been putting off," I instructed. While Tony worked, I methodically went through the house, documenting everything with my phone. Our joint bank accounts, investment statements, the house deed, insurance policies, 22 years of financial entanglement spread across the dining room table I'd built for our 5th anniversary. At midnight, I called Henry Carter, an attorney I'd met through a construction arbitration case. Henry had mentioned once that he handled divorces too. "The ugly ones," he'd said with a grim smile. "Jack? It's late. Everything okay?" He answered on the 3rd ring. "I need a divorce attorney. Tonight, if possible." "I'll pay emergency rates," I said. There was a pause. "How bad?" he asked. "Public infidelity. 200 witnesses. Her boss is probably in the ER with a broken nose," I explained. "I'll be at my office in 30 minutes," he replied without hesitation. By the time Melissa arrived home at 2:47 a.m., I was prepared. I watched through the security camera as she tried her key, confusion turning to rage as she realized it didn't work. The pounding started immediately. "Jack, open this door right now! This is my house too!" she yelled through the door. I opened the door but didn't unlock the security chain. She stood there, mascara streaked, her designer dress still torn, blood, Richard's blood, staining the fabric. "Let me in," she said, her voice shifting from demanding to pleading. "We need to talk. We can talk through the chain." "How long?" I asked. "What?" she responded, confused. "How long have you been intimate with him?" I clarified. She straightened, the corporate executive returning. It's not what you think. That dance, it didn't mean anything. Richard had too much to drink, she started. Stop, I interrupted, pulling out my phone and showing her the video someone had already posted online. It has 30,000 views already. The caption says, CEO gropes employee at company gala while her husband watches. Want to try again? Her face crumbled. Jack, please. You don't understand how things work in my world. These relationships, they're complicated, she pleaded. No, they're not. You're married. He grabbed your ass. You liked it. Pretty simple, I countered. That's just how business works at this level. You wouldn't understand, she protested. You're right. I don't understand how spreading your legs for your boss is a business strategy, I shot back. The slap she tried to deliver was blocked by the door chain. How dare you? After everything I've done for us, for our future, she raged. What future? The one where you leave me for him once his divorce is final. Oh, did you think I didn't know about his divorce? You talk in your sleep, Melissa. Richard says this. Richard thinks that. I've been listening to you dream about him for months, I revealed. She shifted tactics, tears flowing freely now. 22 years, Jack. Doesn't that mean anything? She sobbed. It meant everything to me. But apparently it was just your rough draft. I saw the revision tonight. The one where you're the corporate queen and I'm the embarrassing first husband you had to tolerate, I replied coldly. I'll take half of everything, she threatened, the tears stopping as quickly as they'd started. The house, your business, all of it. Actually, you won't, I informed her, holding up the folder Henry had prepared. Texas is an at-fault divorce state. Adultery affects the settlement. And that prenup you signed? The one you said we'd never need? It's ironclad. You get what you brought into the marriage, which was student debt I paid off, and a minimal settlement. You've already seen a lawyer? It's been 3 hours, she exclaimed in disbelief. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're properly motivated. Henry Carter, by the way. You might recognize the name. He handled the Costello divorce. Remember? The one where the cheating spouse got nothing? I said. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it, her face paling. I've been suspended pending investigation, she whispered. That was fast. I guess having intimacy with the boss is still frowned upon, even in your sophisticated world, I observed. You've ruined me, she said quietly. No, Melissa, you ruined yourself. I just pulled back the curtain. Your things will be packed in boxes in the garage tomorrow. Pick them up between 9 and noon. I won't be here, I stated firmly. Where am I supposed to go tonight? She asked desperately. Not my problem. Maybe Richard has a couch you can use. Oh, wait, he's probably still in the hospital, I replied, closing the door. I closed the door on her protests, on 22 years of marriage, on the woman I'd once loved more than anything. Through the window, I watched her call someone, her sister probably, and wait for a ride. Melissa thought she could threaten me with lawyers and settlements. She had no idea I'd already spoken to the best divorce attorney in the city, and he was very interested in our case. Henry Carter's office occupied the top floor of a building I'd helped construct 10 years ago. Funny how life circles back. He poured me coffee from a French press while laying out documents across his conference table. The video went viral, he said, turning his laptop toward me. Local news picked it up. Corporate scandal at Hammond Industries Gala. Your wife is famous. Ex-wife, I corrected, soon enough. Here's what we have. Public adultery with 200 witnesses, several of whom have already reached out offering statements. The prenup is solid. I reviewed it last night. She was represented by counsel when she signed it, so she can't claim ignorance, he explained. What about Richard's assault charges? I asked. Henry actually smiled. That's the beautiful part. I made some calls. Richard Hale has a history. 3 different women have filed HR complaints against him over the past 5 years, all buried with settlements and NDAs. But NDAs don't apply to criminal proceedings. If he pushes assault charges, we counter with assault. You were defending your wife from unwanted advances, he said. She wanted them, I pointed out. He doesn't know you know that. Besides, the video shows him groping her first. You reacted as any reasonable husband would, Henry countered. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. They fired me. Are you happy now? Henry read it over my shoulder. Actually, that helps us. She can't claim financial hardship in the divorce if she was terminated for cause. Document everything, he advised. Over the next 3 weeks, the dominoes fell in sequence. Hammond Industries, facing a PR nightmare, conducted a thorough investigation. They discovered Richard had been using company funds for business dinners with Melissa at hotels. The forensic accountant they hired found a pattern going back 18 months. 18 months of lies. Richard's assault charges were dropped after his lawyer saw our evidence and understood the countersuit we'd file. His wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, reached out to me through Henry, offering her own testimony about finding receipts for jewelry that she never received. We compared dates. Every conference Melissa attended in the last year and a half aligned with purchases Richard made. The divorce proceedings were almost anticlimactic. Melissa showed up with a lawyer she could barely afford, trying to argue that the prenup shouldn't apply because she'd contributed to building the business. Henry destroyed that argument with a simple question. Can you show any direct investment, labor or documented contribution to Turner Construction? She couldn't, because there wasn't any. While I was building our life with my hands, she was building her career on her back. The judge awarded me the house and my business intact. Melissa received $30,000, essentially the statutory minimum in Texas for a marriage of our length when adultery is proven. She had 30 days to vacate the house. This isn't fair, she said after the ruling. 22 years and I get nothing? You got an education I paid for, I reminded her. You got a career I supported. You got a house to live in that I built. What you didn't get was Richard, because he's too busy trying to save his own ass to care about yours. The real satisfaction came from unexpected sources. 3 of Melissa's former colleagues reached out to apologize for the gala night. We knew something was going on, one admitted over coffee. We should have said something. Not your responsibility, I told him. Hammond Industries implemented new workplace relationship policies, specifically citing the recent incident as a catalyst for change. Richard was quietly transferred to their Phoenix office, a demotion disguised as a lateral move. His LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned his MBA from Wharton or his executive leadership role. He was just another middle manager now, his reputation destroyed by his own arrogance. Melissa applied to dozens of companies, but the story had spread too far. HR departments Googled candidates now, and her name brought up the video, the scandal, the investigation findings. She finally took a job at a small logistics company in Oklahoma, making a third of her previous salary. The last time I saw her was when she came to get her things. She stood in the garage, looking at the boxes I'd packed, each one labeled with ruthless efficiency. Kitchen items, not built by Jack. Clothes, purchased with corporate salary. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. I loved you, she said quietly. You loved the idea of leaving me behind, I corrected. You just wanted to secure the replacement first. She loaded her car in silence. As she drove away, I noticed she was driving a used Honda, not the Mercedes she'd leased before. The plates were from Oklahoma. The papers were signed, the house was mine, and Melissa was finally out of my life. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that sometimes the quiet man everyone underestimates holds all the power. 6 months. That's all it took for 22 years to become a distant memory. I'm sitting on the deck I built, the same one Melissa used to be embarrassed by, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rust. My coffee's gone cold, but I don't mind. These days, I've learned to appreciate the temperature of things. The house is different now. Not structurally, every beam, every joint is still solid, but it feels different. Lighter somehow, like I've stripped away old paint to find good wood underneath. I replaced our bed, donated the dining room set she'd picked out, and turned her home office into a workshop. The smell of sawdust has replaced her perfume, and I prefer it that way. Henry called yesterday with an update. Melissa's living in Tulsa now, working as an operations coordinator for a trucking company. $52,000 a year, no company car, no expense account. She shares an apartment with another divorcee she met through a support group. The irony isn't lost on me. She's back to the life she was so desperate to escape. Richard fared worse. The Phoenix transfer lasted 3 months before Hammond Industries quietly let him go with a minimal severance package. Last Henry heard, Richard was consulting independently, which is corporate speak for unemployed, with a LinkedIn profile. His ex-wife got the house in their divorce, along with most of their assets. Turns out judges don't look favorably on executives who use company funds to finance affairs. Turner Construction, on the other hand, is thriving. Word spread about what happened. The blue-collar community is small and talks. But instead of hurting business, it helped it. Clients respected that I'd stood up for myself, that I'd built something solid enough to survive a storm. We've taken on 3 major commercial projects in the last quarter alone. Last month, I hired 2 new crews and promoted Tony Garza to foreman. You sure about this? He'd asked when I offered him the position. I don't have a degree. Neither do I reminded him. But we've got something better. We know how to build things that last. I've been seeing someone new. Sarah owns the lumber yard where I buy materials. She's nothing like Melissa. Doesn't care about corporate ladders or designer clothes. She wears steel-toed boots to dinner and has sawdust in her hair more often than not. When I told her about building this house, she asked to see the plans I'd drawn up, genuinely interested in the joinery techniques I'd used. "You built this yourself?" she'd asked, running her hands along the crown molding in the living room. "Every inch," I confirmed. "That's incredibly romantic," she said, then caught herself. "Sorry, given what happened, that's probably—" "No," I interrupted. "It is romantic. I built it with love. Just turned out to be the wrong recipient. We don't go to galas or corporate events. Instead, we attend trade shows and builders' conventions." She doesn't correct my grammar or suggest I dress differently. When her friends ask what I do, she says, "He builds things that matter," and means it. The other day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Melissa. "I'm sorry," was all it said. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, that's long gone, but because there was nothing to say. She'd chosen her path, I'd chosen mine. The difference was I'd built mine on solid foundation while she'd built hers on sand. Looking back, I understand what happened. Melissa wasn't evil, just lost. She'd confused climbing with growing, advancement with achievement. She'd seen my contentment as complacency, my satisfaction as settling. In trying to become something more, she'd become something less. I kept one photo from our marriage, our wedding day at the courthouse. Not for nostalgia, but as a reminder. In it, we're both smiling, genuinely happy, unaware of how differently we'd defined success. I was holding her hand with the same hands that would build our house, that would build my business, that would eventually defend what I'd created. Melissa once told me I was too boring for someone like her. She was right about one thing. I am boring. I show up, I do the work, I keep my word, and I treat people with respect. In the end, boring outlasted flashy, and I was left with everything that truly mattered. My dignity, my home, and the knowledge that I never have to pretend to be someone else again. The sun's almost down now, the sky shifting to purple. Sarah's coming over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just steaks on the grill and beer in bottles, not champagne flutes. We'll sit on this deck I built, under the pergola I installed last month, and talk about real things. Tomorrow I'll wake up in the house I constructed, drive to the business I created, and continue building a life that no one can take away. That's the thing about working with your hands. You learn that the only things worth having are the things you build yourself. Melissa never understood that. She thought success was something you took, something you climbed toward, something you achieved by stepping on others. But real success? Real success is simpler than that. It's building something solid enough to weather any storm, true enough that you never have to lie about it, and strong enough that when someone tries to tear it down, they only destroy themselves. I built my life with these hands, and these hands, scarred and calloused as they are still building. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.